is that Bennett is intrinsically faster, but that's what this sort of work is all about on the climb. You're going to get rid of some, like we've seen Merlier go, Ackermann as well. You might not get rid of Sam Bennett, but at least you can burn the legs of the guys who are the more pure sprinters. And that's where a guy like Mads Pedersen here on the left-hand side in the white jerseys are coming up and just having a chat to his teammates, maybe asking them to ramp it up a little bit more because he's so comfortable. Looks like that's exactly what he said. Have a look at Kenny Elizondo wind it now, because that's where he comes into his own. Hurt the rest, then it levels the playing field in the sprint.
Is Caden Groves up there?
He is. He's right near the front, actually. He's just behind the team of Quick-Step Alpha Vinyl, and he was also looking relatively comfortable.
That bodes extraordinarily well for him. We could have a proper scrap at the end of today. That will be magnificent. 6.2 kilometres to the top. Sean, this is a battle of attrition, and there's an awful lot that are starting to struggle today, and it's not over yet by any means.
No, it's not over. Still 6+ kilometres to go here, and we can see, you know, the way Trek Segafredo are wanting to push on here, and it'd be interesting to see if we can just get a shot further up in the peloton to see where Bennett is hanging about. That is going to be very important. If he can stay in here, well then, you know, that is going to change things, because when they get to the top of this one, who is going to continue chasing? And the breakaway, we can see there's still, you know, 2:53 of an advantage. That is a good lead, considering Trek what they've been doing here for quite a number of kilometres now. So the break is doing a real good job. And sometimes when you get to the top of the climb, if the sprinters you know, haven't got rid of the men that they want to get rid of, the fast men, it could be a little bit of, you know, stand off for a while, and who's going to continue on the chasing. We'll have to see, you know, what that will be at the summit of this climb.
We've actually dealt with the steepest part of the climb so far, but it comes back and nudges up towards that kind of incline. You can see the pace that we're setting at the moment, but we've been up around about the 12%, and that, in fact, I think these guys in the chase are just about at that point. The breakaway have just managed to bridge beyond that, and in fact, it just comes down under 6% for them. Meanwhile, for the peloton itself, it's still a big task, I can tell you. And that's possibly, I mean, it's amazing, actually, how our breakaway is sustaining the punishment at the moment. In fact, they're imposing it. And that, I don't know, when do we start believing in the breakaway, Robbie? Or do you think after we get to over the peak, there's so much strength in the chase at the moment that 64 kilometres is just going to get chewed up?
Yeah, I expect that there's a sort of agreement between the sprinters' teams, of, you know, those who are likely to still be in the peloton over the top of this climb, that they'll say, OK, once we get over the top, if we're still there, we will contribute to the chase. And the example there is Bora Hansgrohe for Sam Bennett. If they don't get rid of him, then yes, of course it's in their interest to help in the chase. But if this break, I mean, they're holding the peloton at the moment with this pace at around 3 minutes. If they can get to 40 kilometres to go with 3 minutes, and they're able to up that tempo, really go into full team time trial mode, they're a chance.
Well, it's a little bit of calm here, and before we get over the crest, it seems appropriate to bring Dan Lloyd in a moment such as this. I'm not quite sure whether you would have relished a day like today, Dan, or looked at it and thought, this is almost impossible. Oh, I think Dan's gone for a coffee. We'll be back with him in a short while.
Shall we answer for him, Calvin?
Shall we? Go on then.
Yeah, why not? I think on behalf of Dan, he's saying, oh, no, wait. I would have smashed away from the peloton on the flat. I would have accelerated on the smaller climbs, gone even harder on the big climb, found myself solo with around 60k to go, and just gone further in front from there, and just thought really hard about the victory salute that I was going to make on the day, says Dan Lloyd.
Yeah, sort of doubling up from Estremadura, I think.
No, I think that's too good, Robbie. I think Dan will be comfortable enough here in the peloton. He was quite a good climber, so
yeah, yes.
The days where this climb, maybe not too steep gradient, you know, riding at a very strong pace, but you know, nothing. A really mad pace. He was a good rider at that, and we'd have to give him that credit. And
yeah, we do.
He's the man who's looking after us here.
On that note, I'll come in.
Oh, hang on, Dan. I was just going to float your boat one more time, Dan. what Dan would have been doing is exactly what Trek Segafredo were doing when he's with Cervelo Test Team. I'm not sure you know he rode for Cervelo, but he did. He would have been doing this in service of Tor Husov and getting rid of a lot of fast riders and dragging Tor towards yet another win in a big race.
Dan, I just thought that this is about to kick off by the looks of things, and so an appropriate moment for you to to get in just as this is holding at 2 minutes and 55. I thought set fire. You can set fire to it. Here we go.
Thank you very much, Carlton. Yes, in and ready, as is Adam Blythe. So as ever, you'll be hearing more from Carlton Kirby and Sean Kelly in the latter stages of today's stage. For the meantime, though, Adam, I and Robbie McKeown will take you through the next 30 or so kilometres. 4.4 kilometres until we get to the top of this first category climb, and that's for the breakaway. The bunch, given the speeds we've just seen of around about 30 kilometres per hour, will be a little less than 1 kilometre further down this zigzagging road up the hillside or mountainside here. It's a big one, Robbie, first category. But Adam and I were just discussing before we opened the mics that maybe Juan Pedro Lopez and Kenny Elissonde, whilst great climbers, are not the best motors for the 5% gradients we've got here.
No, they deal with this gradient quite well, but yeah, I think they're doing a really good job of it. I think they're trying to ride a tempo that's not really their own. I mean, if the race was to really get ripped apart and all the best climbers go, I mean, they're going to be there for longer than most. I think on the climb is fine for them. After that, not the best motors for the rest of this chase. I think they're okay on this climb. It's a tough one for really good climbers to ride the right pace for a fast man. They've got to listen and be told, like we saw Pedersen come up before, and say, a bit harder, you can go a bit harder, I'm fine.
I think they're still doing that. I think Pedersen he's comfortable where he's at, but I think he can still go another 5% into his effort. By the looks of just where he's sat, and he had to, Luke Durbridge has pulled off the front by the looks of things, so he's come back a few gaps. Pedersen had to shut a little gap down, and just the way that he's sitting right up at the front, if he was suffering a little bit knowing that riders were going out the back, he'd probably accept that and use the whole peloton to drift back a bit. So he made sure he was still in there, but made sure his team were riding as fast as possible. They've lost Ellison on the front already because he didn't look like he could ride quick enough. The gap is still stabilised at 2:53. And I think Mads wants this to go on more, but he doesn't want to use up too much of the team, so he hasn't got anyone left to ride on the front. So he's in a bit of a predicament that I want to go harder, I want to drop the sprinters, but I can't use up all my team.
Well, Trek Segafredo with a clear plan for today, and that is to deliver Mads Pedersen, the Danish rider, to the line with as little sprinters left in the main peloton alongside him as possible. So they've set their stall out. They put their rides on the front from the foot of this climb, and in fact way before that. Team Bike Exchange alongside them as soon as our 6-man breakaway, now down to 5, went up the road fairly quickly, I've got to say, after the flag dropped this morning. There wasn't a huge battle to get in it. I did speak to Thomas de Gent here, who's now being distanced before the stage starts, and he did indicate that it might be a day for him. He was your pick, Robbie, wasn't he?
Yeah, I thought I'd pick him because I thought it would be a break. I thought a 22-kilometre climb of Category 1 would be enough to scare off the sprinters and their teams. Apparently not, though, so wrong again, and I'll have another pick in a couple of days.
If you just look at Pedersen there, he's just moved up once again out that corner, accelerating. And if he was fully on his limit, they are shedding riders now slowly, but I think if he's able to just move up that 1 or 2 place over that wheel, accelerate out that corner, he's definitely got more to give, I think.
I'm a bit surprised they haven't really tried to offload Sam Bennett. He was looking quite good early on the climb. He was riding in and around the Ineos team, but it's not like they've really taken him to his limit, and I thought that would be the major goal.
I think that's what they're trying to do.
Well, that for me was why Mads Pedersen came up alongside Kenny Elissonde and Juan Pedro Lopez, and we presume said, come on guys, we need to lift it more. We might have got rid of the likes of Pascal Ackermann, but Sam Bennett, my biggest competitor, is still in this group, and we need to make sure that he's not in 3.1 Ks from now for this lead group, and a little bit more than that for the main peloton.
Or does he? If he's at this point now, hold on to it, get onto the top of the climb, Bora can then say, we're still here, we've got a chance to win the stage, let's work together and use the strength in numbers.
Well, I would say, given that on 2 occasions Mads Pedersen lost out to Sam Bennett, they fancy their chances more if the Irishman from Bora Hansgrohe was no longer a part of that main peloton. The other thing that we were discussing before we came on air. Yeah. Oh, yeah, he's been distanced in the bright yellow of Arkea Samsic here. Brilliant ride for him on day 3, wasn't it, where he led the sprint out and managed to cling on for 3rd place. But he's got a team surrounding him, Robbie. We see this a lot this year, actually, at the Giro d'Italia, haven't we?
Yeah, and what I was just thinking of, like seeing this and talking about Sam Bennett a few moments ago, if it was really the intention to offload them, to really get rid of them, well, it's kind of too late. With 3K to go, you get your teammates around you, it's highly likely that the gap won't be big enough and they'll be able to ride their way back on. It all depends on how much firepower comes to the front of the peloton, the rest of Trek Segafredo, and how many from Bike Exchange Jayco come forward, and any other teams. But with 3K to go, it's probably too little too late to distance them by enough.
I've just noticed there as well, just in the middle, right in the middle of that peloton, Sam Bennett is still in there.
You rejoin us with just 2.5 kilometres to go to the only categorised climb of the day, and certainly the biggest lump of the entire profile. It is a first category climb, and so at the top, it's 10 points for the first rider across the line, then 6, 4, 2 and 1 for the next 4. So the top 5, basically the breakaway, will sweep up those points. So not likely to see any huge changes in that particular competition. But today is all about how the stage is going to play out. We've got 2 teams at least who said we want it to be a sprint, but from a slightly reduced group without the best sprinters here. Sam Bennett of Bora Hansgrohe has done a tremendous job to still be within this pack, with a number of teammates surrounding him still, so watch out for the Irishman later on in the stage. But one thing that Adam and I were discussing just before, I think it was before the breakaway, even pre-show this morning, the problem sometimes, Robbie, with going incredibly hard on a climb, if you've got a guy like Mads Pedersen who's able to get up there and then sprint obviously at the end, is how many teammates do you still have left to do the remainder of the chasing behind the break, which is 3 minutes, and indeed to keep the pace high enough that those sprinters don't get back on with their teams.
Yeah, and that's why we're seeing them just use Kenny Elizondo and Juan P. Lopez, who's the last man left out of those 2, and maybe keeping the others relatively rested until they get over the top. Those bigger engines to push it over the top and on the flat roads down towards the finish. But yeah, if you get rid of too many people, you leave yourself with all the work to do for yourself, and then you could bring yourself into problems. You can't catch a 5-man break that's just ridden tempo. They're strong riders, obviously, by getting out there. And yeah, you might come up short, so you'd be better sometimes to keep a few more on board and get some cooperation going amongst teams.
Caden Groves just at the back there as well, and that's Juan P. Lopez off the front now as well. So it looks to be Mads Pedersen on the front of this peloton himself, or sat second wheel. 1 rider left. Juan P. Lopez has gone backwards.
Yeah, 1 rider in front of the Dane Mads Pedersen, who set his stall out before the start of today's stage, told us exactly what his team's ambitions were, and indeed what his own ambitions are for today's stage.
Oh,
and we can applaud that, can't we? We spoke about that in the breakaway show. It's nice to hear somebody open about what they're going to do and then implementing that plan once you get the live coverage. So speaking of that, if you haven't heard it before, here's Mads Pedersen now.
What about that long climb, do you think? I mean, it's a 22 kilometers climb, not the thing you would probably are looking out for the most.
Yeah, of course, it's a long climb, and in the past I would do everything to avoid a climb like this, but with the legs I had this season and the last few months, then it's a climb that fits me. Not super good, but I can do it and I can manage it, and I think I'm a bit better than other sprinters on a climb like this, so why not take the chance and try to reduce the bunch to make it easier in the sprint.
So what is the key to the success for you today then?
Having a really good team who's committed to make the plan.
Mads Pedersen there of Trek Segafredo, who's now 3rd wheel behind his teammate. I think that's Tiberi now on the front for Trek Segafredo. Yep. And just behind that, the Australian champion, Luke Plapp. Now, one man that we haven't mentioned too much so far today is Ethan Hayter. Very fast in a finish, especially from a slightly more reduced group. You'd presume, Adam, that they're working for him now.
Yeah, I'd say so, and this is a good opportunity to do so. You know, we have to remember, over the tops of climbs, it's not too technical over the top of this climb, I think, right at the start. So it's going to be a fast road for the top of it, and if there is a couple of twists and turns right at the top, it will be fast. And if you're distanced by that in between, if the cars make a barrage and there's that 30-40 second gap just at the top, it's sometimes over the top which can be the hardest. You get to the top, big sigh of relief, and then with it not being a really freewheely downhill, more of one that you have to push on the pedals, that can be super hard to get back on. So if they've just distanced them over the top, and Trek Segafredo do get their help from Luke Plapp and Ineos Grenadiers, that can be also great for Hayter. The last shot I saw of him, though, he was right towards the back, Ethan Hayter, so you'd have to think that he'd moved up or started to move up by now.
Just over 600 metres still to go. Sorry, Robbie, before we get to the top of this climb. As we mentioned before, it's not really the mountains points that I don't think any of these riders will be thinking about today. They've set their stalls out to go for the stage victory, and I've got to say they've done a brilliant job on this climb. When you saw the body language of the Trek Segafredo riders, when you see the grimace on the face of Luke Plapp just a few moments ago, very talented young Australian who's been good on the climbs, it shows you how fast they have been riding in that main peloton, and yet they've lost very little time, the 5 remaining riders up front, to the main peloton behind. So well done to them so far. Big job still to do, because as you can see, over the top of this climb, they will still have in excess of 64 kilometres to go. I would say that of all the rides in this breakaway, the man that's probably going to be most looking to get the maximum 10 points in this climb would be Jesus Herrada, the Spanish rider of Team Cofidis. But wait and see.
Here we go. This is what they wanted. Sam Bennett eventually being distanced, only around 1 kilometre before the top.
And there we go.
Oh, Dan. Nostradamus over here.
Glad I said that when I did. Yes, Jesus Herrada, Spanish rider in his home Grand Tour. I think that he would really like to take the King of the Mountains jersey back home at the end of this race in Madrid in a couple of weeks' time. So it's him that looks like he's going to, uncontested, take the maximum 10 points on this first category climb. Fred Wright looked to be the next rider across. Yes, there he is from Bahrain Victorious. Then it's Jimmy Jansen's number 183 with the blue jersey there of Alpecin de Koenig. Harry Sweeney, and the other rider in our breakaway is Samuela Battistella, former world champion in the under-23 ranks, even though he didn't cross the line first. Many of you will remember that it was actually was it Niels Eekhoff, I think, who crossed the line first that day.
Niels Eekhoff, yeah, it was, and he got disqualified for motor pacing back to the peloton after an incident much earlier in the race, over 100 kilometres before the finish, I think it was. But Dan, I want to know how you get that feed that's 10-12 seconds ahead of the rest of us, so you can see it, say it, and then we think you've just made an incredible prediction.
Or you have
Serrata being the one to
you have to pay a lot for that sort of thing, Robbie.
Hey, what you just mentioned before about some of the faces in the peloton, we saw Lopez contorting his face, Luke Plapp, the way he's looking fairly pained as well, and the camera just drifted back and I saw Remco Evenepoel. Absolutely nothing. Face so relaxed, I thought he might have been completely Botoxed. Not even a wrinkle. Nothing. Like he's not even out racing.
Well,
Sam Bennett, on the other hand, he's turning his whole body inside out.
The interesting thing with Sam Bennett there is, unlike Dan McClay, he didn't have multiple teammates around him. He's got one rider who has dropped back there to help him, but was distancing the Irishman in the green jersey there as well. I mean, he'll be on the radio, presumably, pretty quickly to say, look, I need this pace to be slightly less than you're setting right now. But I guess that's a problem that they would have, Adam, is that they've got GC ambitions here. They've still got 3 riders within 2 minutes and 22 of the race lead. They're not going to drop Igita, Hindley or Kelderman back, so there's a responsibility will be on the shoulders of the rest of them. Yeah,
it is going to be on the responsibility of them, and that is the issue with having the GC riders towards, well, that want to go for GC, the likes of Jai Hindley, stick around him. If Sam makes it over, great, but we're not going to send the team back. Wow, it's different weather, isn't it? But they're not going to send the full team back, I don't think. But you can see the descent. It is a very fast descent. Remco Evenepoel moving up here, just on the left-hand side. But these last kilometres of this climb, you can just see gaps in the peloton appearing. Ethan Hayter has moved towards the front. I think he's just took behind one of the Movistar riders. No, he hasn't. That's Dylan van Baal. But this is just looking at the 2 quick-step riders there, Peter Surrey and Cavagna, just out the back of this peloton already. Well, not already, they are right towards the top, but if that's a sign of things to come, then you know, I'm sure the likes of Jumbo-Visma, Enrico Mas with Movistar will take confidence in that, but Trek Segafredo doing the damage, but the time gap, I can't believe that time gap is still where it is.
2:47, yeah. So it was hovering around the 3-minute mark for much of the climb. There's been an acceleration by Trek Segafredo over the top in order to try and distance some more of the sprinters, and they've managed that. Sam Bennett, Pascal Ackermann, amongst a number of riders who are no longer in that peloton, who'll be desperately hoping that they can get themselves in a group or surround themselves by teammates who'll be able to chase back on. So this is an important moment, Robbie, because they've achieved much of what they wanted to do so far, Trek Segafredo, but they have to keep the pace high, otherwise those riders will get back on.
Yeah, they really do need to push hard from here, because they left it quite late to ramp things up and do enough to get rid of Sam Bennett. It was really only in the final kilometre of that climb that Bennett had to let the wheels go. So that's a really good effort by Sam Bennett, and the chances of him coming back are very, very good. As the peloton sort of goes single file down this descent and strings out, they'll in a way come back towards him and make that gap effectively shorter between him and the back of the peloton. And with corners like this, that's a chance to always catch up a little bit more and just get himself back in contact.
I think this is giving me, I was saying to Dan, Robbie, this is giving me a few flashbacks of the Giro stage that Arnaud Démare won. There was a breakaway that only got caught. They had a little ramp towards the line. I forget which stage it was, but right towards the finish, a long downhill all the way down to the finish pretty much, and they held on until the last 300 metres, and then were caught right on the line.
Yeah, it was a similar sort of scenario with you know, some really strong riders out the front. On that occasion, it seemed the peloton made quite a bad miscalculation and then left everything too late and then ran out of gas, and the combination of the breakaway was incredibly strong.
Yeah, or they made a perfect calculation to catch them in the last 300 metres.
Yeah, well,
they definitely didn't.
Yeah, well, they would have said afterwards, no, that's all we were trying to do.
Exactly.
Just catch them, you know.
A split in the leading group of 5 riders after the acceleration of Jesus Herrada of Cofidis to get the 10 points over the KOM. 2 riders have managed to get themselves back up to his wheel. 2 riders, Jimmy Jansen's and Samuele Battistella, still fighting to get back on. However, I would imagine that all 5 of them, including the 3 currently out front, will want to make sure there are 5 riders for the rest of today's stage, because whilst they're on a pretty technical and beautiful descent, I've got to say, as things stand, it's a short one. They went up from about 250 metres above sea level to the top of that climb, which is at 1603, but they only descend down to around about 1,000 metres above sea level, and in fact about 1,200. The descent proper stops, and then it's a false flat downhill for much of the rest of the stage. So 5 riders together, if they are still all feeling strong, is going to be far more effective at trying to keep this main peloton at bay than 3 up front without the other 2. So I'd imagine that they will wait, collect themselves, and persist with this breakaway. And I think that they've got a half-decent chance, because gone are Team Bike Exchange. Not sure why, Robbie. Have you seen whether Caden Groves was still there?
I didn't see exactly where he was, but I got the impression he was still in the group, but he drifted a bit further back in the peloton, but looked like he was getting over the top intact.
He was just
sort of picking through those groups.
He was just at the back when Sam Bennett was at the back. He had 2 or 3 teammates around him, though. I think it was around 1.5 kilometres to go. He was just towards the back, so he might have been able to hold on, but just behind Sam Bennett at that moment, so he might have been distance. But the good news is he did have a couple of teammates with him.
So Battistella back on. We've got a group of 4, and Jimmy Jansen's, the experienced 33-year-old Belgian rider from Alpecin de Koning, is about to make contact as well. So we started off with a group of 6 at the start of today's stage. Omar Goldstein was also there for Israel Premier Tech, but unable to sustain the pace set by the others on that climb. So we're down to these 5 now. Maximum time gap was, I think, around about 4.5 minutes. A couple of teams, Bike Exchange and Trek Segafredo, started riding far before that, when it was around about 2.5 minutes. They allowed it to drift out to that 4.5 minute mark. And it has been coming down since, but started to stabilise at around about the 2.5 to 3 minutes. So we'll see how many teams have got riders left to do the important chasing over the last 56 kilometres of today's stage. It's incredible the contrast in the weather on the other side of this climb that they've just crested. Basically, they were just in the clouds on the other side and come out of them on this side.
It's like they've just ridden into a different country, different continent.
Yeah, different time zone.
Oh, tell me about it.
Well, another reminder that La Vuelta is not the only professional bike race that you're able to watch this week. We've got the Mountain Bike World Championship starting later on today. Territory restrictions do apply, but it's also stage 2 of the Deutschland Tour. If you don't want to spoil it from what happened yesterday, close your ears now. The perfect response from Caleb Ewan to his non-selection for the World Championships in Australia late this year by the national selectors. He took his first win for a number of months in a sprint finish yesterday. Today, though, we can see that it's the Ineos Grenadiers riding on the front with Egan Bernal, who continues to make his comeback from that awful crash in January. And as I said, you can catch that either live or indeed on demand if you're in the right territory later on today or first thing tomorrow or whenever you've got the time to do so. But lots of bike racing coming up, not just for the rest of August, but throughout September. It's a very, very busy time of year in the world of cycling. So just to let you know what the course looks like from here on in, the Breakaway riders will be done and dusted with the vast majority of this descent, and it's this valley road that goes steadily downwards but not by very much. Effectively, the altitude that they are at in a few moments' time is not dissimilar to the altitude at the finish line in Cistierna. Before we get there, there is an intermediate sprint, and it's there that the bonus seconds are located today, as opposed to the top of the climb, as they are on some of the stages. But I think it is the bonus points there, and the points for the classification, that a number of riders may be interested in behind if the Breakaway is caught before then. I'm not expecting it to be. And incidentally, the points at the finish are not as much as your standard sprint stage, and that's, I guess, because of that big first category climb they've just gone over. 30 if you cross the line first, 25 for second, 22 for third.
Sorry, just to interrupt you there. Sam Bennett is getting back on there. He's got 2 teammates up in front of him, and I think this is the group that might be in front of Caden Groves, but those 3 riders in front there, Sam Bennett is the last person in that group. Sorry, Dan.
That's all right. Well, what you want as a sprinter, Robbie, is that when you get dropped, you've also got the likes of Dan McClay dropped, or 1 or 2 of the other sprinters, because in that scenario, rather than just having your own teammates to do the work, you've got the teammates of multiple other sprinters, all with the same ambition.
Yeah, exactly. You could all band together and you know, right the wrongs that were done on the climb, and you know, you've always hoped that you don't get dropped first, and if you get dropped last, that the others are quite close to you as well, that you do get together quickly. You know, otherwise the chase takes much longer and is much harder. You know what else I just noticed is that peloton was split completely in half as well. It was only maybe 80 or 100 metres between the groups, but it shows how much pressure is still on at the front of the race. Antonio Tiberi went over the top, and this is what is left of the peloton. There's the split being closed down. But Tiberi pushed so hard over the top and gave it everything he's got on the descent so far as well. I'm still liking the chances of those sprinters to come back with Bennett, McClay, Caden Groves, if he's not already back on the back of this group.
Well, we're being given a time gap of 35 seconds, but yet another reminder that that gap is likely to be from the front of this main peloton. You can see just what the distance is from the front to the back of it now that split is no longer there. So, in all likelihood, Sam Bennett is far closer to the coattails of this group than that time gap that's currently on your screen suggests.
This is also a great descent, even though if Sam Bennett does get back on, because it's not fully downhill, there's a lot of twists and turns, a lot of accelerating out of corners. It's not where a confident descender can really make up that much time on. Even though Sam Bennett is doing that, it's still going to be hard for him to do so. So even if he does get onto the back, he's going to have to try hard to get back onto the back. Enrico Mas with a Gabba jacket on there by the looks thing. Enric. Did I say Enrico?
Again.
Hey, it's Espanol, no? Enric Mas. He's yeah, got a Gabba jacket on in 25 degrees C.
Well, I'd imagine going up the top of that climb in the clouds, he probably thought this is going to be a chilly old descent, and all of a sudden he came out into the sun.
Whoever had to go and get that jacket for him on that climb must not have been happy.
I'm actually thinking that this breakaway stands a very good chance of staying away today. With Borahan's go, even if Bennett gets back on, they do have limited numbers to really want to use the energy to pull it back.
And Danny Van Poppel is on the front of that group, so he's the last lead-out man by the looks of things. That is him on the front trying to get things back, so sacrificing himself at the minute to hopefully get back on. So it gives Sam a chance, even if he's there or if he's not. If he can recover, great. This will be a big effort he has to make to bring it back for Sam.
I actually love stages designed like this. I think a lot of people and a lot of cycling fans would have looked at today's stage and thought to themselves, why on earth would you have a big first category climb and not finish it at the top of it or just down the other side? Because no GC riders are going to get involved. But the tactics are fascinating between the break and the peloton and the sprinters on days like today. And it hangs really in the balance as we see Luke Plapp now doing his turn on the front for the Ineos Grenadiers. He's working again for Ethan Hayter. Not seen the best of Ethan so far, but he'll be hoping that he can take that elusive win at the race today. It's his first Grand Tour, of course. It's not particularly elusive. It's just his 7th day of Grand Tour riding. What have you made of his debut at a Grand Tour so far, Robbie?
I think it's been quite good. I mean, obviously part of the team time trial where they did very well on day one. After that, in the pure flat bunch sprints in Holland, the Netherlands, I've been asked by some people to refer to as the Netherlands and not Holland, because Holland is made up of 2 provinces, North and South Holland, and they like to speak about the Netherlands as the entire country. Anyway, that's another thing. I think he's been really good. On that uphill finish where Primož Roglic won, Ethan Hayter was 7th, and that was a really tough run to the line. I get the impression he's not quite quick enough to take on the pure sprinters, but a day like today where they're really a bit worn out after the efforts on a Cat 1 climb like we've just seen, that's where he starts to get more on a level playing field.
Just going briefly back to Holland, for me, I think it was the fault of people many years ago who, I'm sure when I used to watch the World Cup football, it was Holland. It wasn't the Netherlands 20, 30 years ago.
That is how we've always referred to it in English as well. And the Netherlands, and in fact, and I read up on it after I was told that, and it's been a push by the Dutch government. It's like a tourism marketing thing to include the whole rest of the country. Like, it's not all about going to Amsterdam and the cafes, people, which is in Holland. It is the Netherlands that has so much more to offer.
Yeah. Well, back to the race. Gap is continuing to come down. 2 minutes and 21 seconds now, the gap from these 5 back to the main peloton behind. Welcome back, everybody. Adam's off to prepare a couple of things for the Breakaway post-race show, so you'll be seeing and hearing more from him after today's stage. For the next 10 kilometres or so, it will be myself and Robbie McEwen chatting you through today's stage 7 of La Vuelta, and after that we will be hearing back from Carlton Kirby and Sean Kelly. Battistella, Wright, Herrada, Sweeney and Jansen still lead this race by that 2 minutes and 20 seconds, and we're inside the last 50 kilometres. And you would imagine, Robbie, given the parkour that they've got to come, given how strong they've looked so far, we're going to be done in an hour.
It will be something like that, yeah, indeed. About an hour to go. I'll be surprised if they take any longer than that, really, at all. And I said, as they were on the climb a bit earlier to Carlton, you know, talking about the chances of success for this breakaway, I thought if they had 3 minutes with 40 kilometres to go, they were going to be incredibly hard to catch. The peloton is now dragging it down towards the 2 minute mark, and I'm not liking their chances as much anymore.
No. They'll give it their all, though. This, as you can see, is a committed breakaway. There's been no dilly-dallying about, no playing with the main peloton behind. They knew what the situation was not long after they went up the road. As soon as they heard that Bike Exchange and Trek Segafredo were working, they would have known they were going to go hard on the climb to try and drop other sprinters, and that they couldn't dilly-dally about. It had to be full gas and right up there in terms of tempo, all the way up the climb and all the way towards the finish. So it's by no means certain, I wouldn't say, that they're going to get caught, but it is now starting to look in the favour of the main peloton today. Whilst we've got a brief part of the race, Robbie, where not too much is happening, I wanted to get your thoughts on how you expect the Belgian media to be reacting to Remco Evenepoel's red jersey as race leader of La Vuelta after his performance yesterday. It will be a frenzy there, won't it?
One word: hyperbole. They will be going bananas. I mean, they sent across, you know, different publications and online and print and television. They sent some 12 journalists to the Vuelta purely to just cover Remco Evenepoel. They'll be in ecstasy.
I almost feel sorry for how much pressure he has on his shoulders from the Belgian media and the Belgian public, who obviously absolutely love bike racing. I've got another stat through from Cillian Kelly, who says that Evenepoel is the youngest leader of La Vuelta since Ettore Pastorelli won the opening time trial in 1988, which is the year that Sean Kelly won the overall. Youngest ever leader of this race, Miguel Indurain, in 1985, when he was just 20 years of age.
Wow. It's funny how some stats like that get completely forgotten at the end of someone's career, with him, of course, like Indurain, you know, win 5 tours and Giros, etc. Quite incredible stats like that do sort of get pushed right to the bottom of the stat sheet. I'm glad you dragged that one up, or at least Cillian Kelly did.
Yes, not me, not me. We saw a quick glimpse there of Remco Evenepoel right towards the front of this race. Obviously, going by yesterday's performance, you'd think dead cert to be on the podium by the end of this race, but he still, despite all his amazing results, does have a lot to prove in the biggest stage races in the world. He has won World Tour level stage races, the likes of the Tour de Pologne, in true Remco Evenepoel style. I keep banging on about it though, but at Tirreno Adriatico and the Tour de Suisse, both races in which he went into them with fantastic form, when it came to the biggest mountain stages, he didn't seem to quite have it. I am really hoping that he does continue on in the same vein as yesterday, because I think it's going to be fantastic for the sport if he does. I mean, the prospect of, if he manages to win this or finish on the podium of La Vuelta, the prospect of a healthy Remco Evenepoel at 100% fitness versus Tadej Pogacar, versus Jonas Vingegaard, versus all the other fantastic young GC riders is really mouth-watering, isn't it?
It certainly is, and yeah, that has been the question mark. It was my question mark over Remco Evenepoel coming into this Vuelta. That can he keep doing this for 3 weeks long? And in the past, he hasn't been able to do that. He's only ridden a Giro, but also, as you just mentioned, in other stage races, a week long has come to a point where he's been really good early on and put on a huge show. Been absolutely dominant in a stage, but he seems to pay for it in the back end of races, and I'm curious if, you know, there's been an evolution even throughout this season, these powers of recovery, and able to temper his efforts sometimes to maybe not always go at 100%. And I think that's the key to guys like Primož Roglic and others who, you know, Roglic won this race 3 times in a row the last 3 years. They have days where they just don't give it their all. They don't obliterate the field. They just stick with the others. And I'm curious if Remco's temperament for racing that we so enjoy watching, if they're able to just keep him on a leash here and there to make him just dose his efforts.
Well, we might get a very good indication in the next 2 days of this race. I was looking ahead to tomorrow and Sunday, stages 8 and 9 of La Vuelta. Very tough, multiple back-to-back climbs, quite different to what we've seen so far in this race, despite the 2 back-to-back climbs yesterday. We'll see how Quick-Step Alpha Vinyl go about defending his lead, and we'll see how Remco Evenepoel gets on weekend 2 of a Grand Tour. So 6 different leaders this race in the first 6 stages of it. Last time that happened, I'm not sure if it's the only time, but certainly the last time, again according to Cillian Kelly, was at the Giro d'Italia in 1958. That year, Giovanni Pettinati took the Maglia Rosa in Chiavari, After that came Willy Van Itzen, then Ercole Baldini, then Arnaldo Pambianco. Aldo Moser then took it. It was the brother of Francesco. And finally, Salvador Botella on the end of stage 6. So it's been a long time since we've seen the lead of a Grand Tour change hands on every one of the first 6 stages of the race. Did you notice just a few moments ago, Robbie, that Trek Segafredo was suddenly absent from the front of the main peloton, and actually the only rider I could see doing any chasing was Luke Plapp of Ineos Grenadiers, because Quickstep Alpha Vinyl were just behind him.
Yeah, it's one of those moments you're sort of not sure what to make of it, and how long it's going to go on for, that situation. If they've just really pulled themselves away from the front, said that's it, we're not going to ride anymore until other sprinters teams come up and show they're willing to ride with us, or if it's just a momentary thing. A guy like Tiberi go back and grab some bidons and keep the rest of the team as fresh as possible. Think, okay, Ineos are riding a bit, someone else can come up and help. Because if you show that you're too keen, the others will just sit back and say, okay, go ahead and do it. We'll sit here and we'll keep our entire team as fresh as possible for the sprint. And maybe it's just a moment where Bennett has come back. Looks like he has, and they go, okay, let's take it easy for a bit, and there we go, sitting up. So Plapp's gone from the front, and it's all Quickstep Alpha Vinyl. This is the opportunity now for this break. 2.5 minutes, 42k to go. This is the moment to do a Jackie Durand. Now say, this is it, 100%, everyone.
Well, in those few fleeting moments, the chances of the breakaway getting to the line in front of the main peloton went from 3 immediately up towards, I would say, over 50% of a chance, so over 5 out of 10. As soon as we say that, though, Arkea Samsic, who must have Dan McClay back in this main peloton, have said, well, what are you doing? We're going to help you as well. And we've got them riding on the front, as well as Escatel and Team Bike Exchange. And you would presume at some point Trek Segafredo, Ineos and Bora Hansgrohe maybe as well. Took them a while to collect themselves and get organised in the team cars behind, Robbie, didn't it?
Yeah, well, it looked like these riders were at the back of the bunch while the pace was on. They were still sort of just catching their breath after returning, and riders back in the cars and topping up bidons, and one of the Trek Segafredo riders there. But it seems to have worked what Trek Segafredo did, just going away from the front and saying, okay, you've hung on, now it's time to do some work. And they've sort of lured the rest back to the front. The Bike Exchange resuming, ready to go again. Caden Groves caught his breath, and with that, with Arkea Samsic and Bike Exchange Jaco coming to the front so quickly, the chances of the break go down again, although they've got 2 minutes 40.
You could see Ben Turner there, the tall rider from Ineos Grenadiers, also making his debut at a Grand Tour, getting quite frustrated at how far down the line he was having to go to try and find his team car. If you've got a bit more time, the best thing to do is to remain at the back of the peloton with your hand in the air and wait for that team car to get towards the front, because the commissaires will be calling them up. But they're obviously pretty desperate for drinks now it's got hotter. So just over 40 kilometres to go, and the time gap over the last 5 kilometres has gone in the right direction for the breakaway and the wrong direction for the main peloton behind. We'd had Trek Segafredo riding on the climb. They were joined by Luke Plapp of Ineos Grenadiers over the top and down the other side. But then when it was just down to the Australian national champion, I think Ineos Grenadiers said, well, we're not just going to do all the work on our own, particularly with Sam Bennett back in this peloton. So everybody stopped working. And in those few fleeting moments, that gap to the breakaway went up by 20 to 25 seconds. So it's a slightly bigger chance they've got now than just a few moments ago. How gorgeous is that?
That is incredible. Unless you're a sprinter looking out across that and thinking, uh-oh, here come the next couple of days.
It's a big weekend at La Vuelta for the general classification. And incidentally, we do have live coverage of both days from kilometre 0, I believe I'm right in saying. So a slightly earlier start for all of us. Same for the riders. They've been riding, of course, from kilometre 0 every day. We just haven't been able to see them for most of the stages so far. But certainly at the weekends, like last weekend in the Netherlands, And the next two stages, you'll be able to see the action right from the very beginning here on Discovery Plus, GCN Plus and Eurosport. So make sure you tune in at least for the opening part, because the formulation of the breakaway is generally always fascinating on days like that.
Dan, it was one of those things I had when I was racing a Grand Tour. I know a lot of guys had the same thing. You'd lose track of what actual day it is. You wouldn't have a clue what day of the week it was, but you could tell by the type of stages that you got served up, because the weekend always had the biggest, hardest mountain stages for the weekend TV viewers' pleasure. So you could know, like, uh-oh, yep, it's weekend.
It's amazing how little you can know sometimes about what you're, or where you are. I remember a few years ago we did a start line questionnaire at the Giro d'Italia with the pro riders, and we simply asked them, what town are we in? You know, stage start. I think more than 50% had no idea what the name of the town was they were in. They literally just know the race profile, where they need to be in the front, how many days they've still got remaining in that Grand Tour. Probably don't even know which part of the country they are in most of the time.
No, they wouldn't. And the way the Grand Tours have gone this year, some of them might not have known what country they're in.
Yes, very true.
You know, what day is it? Stage 12. Where are you? Stage 12. What country are you in? Stage 12.
Love to know what's going through the minds of these 5 riders. They will have been made aware that their gap has gone up. They'll get that from the board on the motorbike on the side of the road, but also from the sports directors radioing it to them from the team car behind.
I'm liking the cohesion I'm seeing in this group, and the body language, the shoulders low, the heads down as they come out from second wheel to take over. You know, really drilling at that team time trial style of riding. And they're getting a sniff of it. 2:35 with 38 kilometres to go. They believe that they're a good chance.
It's almost the perfect sized group, isn't it? And the perfectly matched group, I would say, in our breakaway at the moment. 5 very strong riders still up there. 5 big motors, as importantly as anything, that have got themselves over that first category climb. They will be able to go very, very fast on this type of terrain, which is predominantly flats all the way into Cisterna, where our finish line is located today. So if they're able to sustain 50 kilometres per hour average, then the peloton has got to go faster. And once you get up to 53, 54, it's quite hard to sustain that on a road bike for any length of time. So this one, for me, certainly, as things stand, is still very much hanging in the balance.
Well, over the next few kilometres, the terrain's going to get just a little bit lumpier as well, which is when you're in a group like this and you've been swapping off and, you know, down that valley road, gradually down, and then the flat roads, as you're always on the pedals. What they're going to get shortly is a little bit more undulating terrain, so you do get then a little bit more of a break in second, third, fourth and fifth position in the group on those downhill sections. So that's going to give the riders, while they're not on the front, just that little bit of respite sitting in the wheels on those downhill sections.
You can see from this that it's not entirely flat or downhill from here to the finish. A couple of very small rises in the road, but nothing that's really going to take too much of the speed out of the breakaway riders. We now have Bike Exchange and Arkea Samsic on the front. Amazing how quickly things can change. Trek Segafredo having to do all of the work into and up that climb just a few moments ago, along with a bit actually from Team Bike Exchange before our camera started rolling. But now it's those two teams who've got the full responsibility to chase this breakdown, and they've got that 2 minutes and 23 that they are going to have to close. I'll be very interested to see whether Bora Hansgrohe do put any rider on the front.
Well, we'll find out fairly soon. But just looking at this, I think this would be a magnificent place to go and ride your bike. It's a pity the riders are going so hard and probably not getting to appreciate the scenery.
Doesn't look too shabby, does it? We're about to hear from Juan Ayuso of UAE Team Emirates, after which you will be hearing from Carlton Kirby and Sean Kelly. So Juan, yesterday, did you manage to catch the stage when you got back to the hotel and watch what happened? Well, I didn't have that much time because with the transfer and everything, I was trying to recover, but I did see some videos and pictures. There are also quite a few of my family and friends there, so for me, it was really nice. Did you surprise yourself yesterday? I was kind of relieved, actually, because I was having a hard time before I came here to Spain, so I started to feel better, and that was a bit of a release. We'll try to keep going and hope the upcoming days will go like yesterday did. When you're on a Grand Tour, you need to be ready to find a moment to rest, but also to be in the fight again. Do you feel ready to be at the front of the race in these coming days? I'm hoping today won't be quite as fast, because the speed has been crazy. Every day here in Spain has just been very fast, just like it was in the Netherlands. Let's hope today it's a bit more relaxed, even if I don't really have faith in that. I do expect it to be hard. Then the weekend, I will be where my legs allow me to be. And what's Machin saying? Should you take advantage of the calm of your good shape? I've just got to enjoy being on my bike. Yesterday he told me to find my own rhythm and pace, and that I will get where I can with the legs I've got. I enjoyed it a lot, even though I climbed almost the entire climb on my own. It was tough, but at the same time, I enjoyed it a lot. Juan Ayuso there of UAE Team Emirates, who put in a fantastic ride yesterday behind the front three riders, who were, of course, Jay Vine, Remco Evenepoel and Enric Mas. And with that, over to you, Carlton.
Thank you, Dan. The Iglesia Sonoro. I don't know who's snoring, but these guys, far from asleep. It's been relentless. Earlier on today, Fred Wright, by the way, was interviewed before he came on and said, today suits me perfectly. I've got to get in the break, though. That's the big problem. And as far as the finish is concerned, he likes the look of it. That bodes very well for this breakaway. I'm actually wondering, because we're going around the lip of this lake, whether if the camera switches back, you can actually see the pursuit. They may well have sight of each other, but even out of sight, hardly out of mind. Gaps 2 minutes and 22. Welcoming back Sean Kelly. Our thanks to Dan Lloyd and Adam Blythe. You'll be, of course, back in their good company a little bit later on. And this man, whose company is he in? That's an isolated shot, but he's had to work very hard today to make sure that he got over the mountain. They didn't break them, the sprinters, that is, Trek Segafredo, but how fatigued are they? That's the big question. I guess we're going to find out, Robbie McEwen, because we've got an intermediate sprint coming up at 22 kilometres. That's in 12 kilometres time. There'll be some points up for grabs. Who's going to be motivated to get up for that after that big climb?
Well, certainly Mads Pedersen, judging by the way he's ridden the rest of this race. Even on the first road stage, he took the intermediate sprint in front of Sam Bennett. Sam Bennett will want to prevent Mads Pedersen creeping any closer in that green jersey competition. So I expect to see the two of them up there trying to be economical and just get some points. Most of the points, the big points, will be taken by the break. There's still some on offer, but they'll want to be, particularly Sam Bennett, I would think, saving the legs as much as possible. So maybe just creeping into the wheel of Mads Pedersen and limiting any damage done there, but really putting all his eggs in the basket of stage win. But at the moment, Trek Segafredo of Mads Pedersen are not on the front, and neither are Bora Hansgrohe of Sam Bennett. It's all down to the teams of Dan McLay and Caden Groves.
It's a devil to close this gap, but they're doing it, the peloton, averaging around 50-51 kilometres per hour, about 49 for the breakaway. Current readings of the pace, it's having a big effect. Look how strung out this is. Sean, from top to tail of this peloton that are chasing on at the moment, that's a good old distance.
Well, it is a nice distance. You can see here, you know, the long straight, and if you're at the back, you can see, you know, the front of the peloton just going around the corner a long ways out ahead of you. But if you're in the slipstream, of course, in this sort of terrain, well then it should be okay, although you always have to be careful. Sitting on the rear, those riders, they are not feeling comfortable, already fatigued, and you know, if they leave a gap go at this pace, you only need, you know, 5 bike lengths, and then it's an impossible job to close it down. So if you need to be up in the front end of the race, well, then you have to try and just move up at points where it is possible, but there's not a lot of occasions here we can see with the pace. But this is turning out now to be a tactical one. We can see Bike Exchange and our KSM Sick are the ones who are riding and still over 2 minutes 12 have an advantage for the breakaway. At what point are they going to say, well, if we keep on riding, Bora sitting on here, also Pedersen with his team, although they have done a huge amount of work with Trek Segafredo. Yeah, it's going to be a one again where the tactic come in. I did mention that earlier. If they do not get rid of the sprinter, who's going to ride afterwards after the breakaway? And that's what's happening. And I would be surprised if, the teams are riding at the moment will not looking for support from the other sprinters, because the teams that are not riding have got the faster men.
Just look at this as well, Sean. There's a brief word here. I've noticed every time that Jimmy Jansen, who's the best sprinter amongst this group, I would suggest, every time he comes off the front, he does it in quite dramatic fashion, as if to say, come on, fellas, I know you don't particularly want me around here, but you're going to have to do some work as well. Has he, Robbie, got the best interest in this group going to the line? Will Jimmy Jansen believe that he's got the beating of them all, those who surround him at the moment?
He may well do. He's got a pretty handy finish, Jimmy Jansen's. But the thing is, when you're, a week into a Grand Tour, you've been off the front all day long with a 22-kilometre climb. It's not your normal sprint anymore at the end. It's just who's got the most gas left in the tank, who's got the freshest legs and can access their full power. I've seen on a number of occasions fast men get into breaks, and what wears them down is that swapping turns at the front and going into a zone that they're not used to sitting at for long periods of time, and they become vulnerable then in the sprint. And well, time will tell if that's the case for Jimmy Jansen's, and time will tell if they're even going to get to sprint for the win, because the peloton's getting organised behind. But at 2 minutes and 9 with 30 kilometres to go, this break is looking pretty good.
2 minutes and 10. Gosh, what, 130 seconds? Doesn't sound like terribly much, does it? Let's see if the gap can be closed, because second by second, we are getting deeper and deeper into this day. 30 kilometres from home. In 8 kilometres time, Sean, we have an intermediate sprint with 5 riders up the road. There's still plenty of points up for grabs for those behind. But do you invest in this, or after all the difficulties that the day's thrown up so far, do you need to preserve all your energy for the end?
Well, not for the intermediate sprint. It's the top 5 that get the points for the green jersey. So
is that all today?
Yes, that's all. So, we can see there that, the teams that might be interested are not, getting really involved for the moment. But again, Trek Segafredo, they have a problem here, because Sam Bennett is back in the group, and, he's going to, try to move up in the group and, prevent Mats Pedersen from taking points if they were going here. But it's not the case. So it's going to be, all for the breakaway now, and it's all about the points are going to be available at the finish line here at the end of the day. And the question will be, will they get organised? And this, they're playing their cards, Bora. They're not getting panicked, and I suppose they're saying, well, we have got 2 stages here. We are under no pressure, and leave the other teams do the chasing. But it comes to a point, if it does get difficult to start closing down in the final 30 kilometres here, but the teams are riding, they're going to also start, onto the director sportives, and where are the teams that should be riding here, where are the sprinters teams that should be pulling us along as well and give us a hand out here. And I could see the pace knocked off once again, which you've seen already in the earlier part here of this stage after the getting off the descent of that big climb.
This chase was reinvigorated by Team Arkea Zamsic, who basically just said, well, if you're all sitting up, we'll give it a go. They'd been punished an awful lot. Maybe were drawn into this chase almost by default, and they won't have liked that one little bit, because they were trying to get Dan McClay over that climb. They were off the back, managed to get themselves back on, and here they are, having done a whole heap of work, and all of a sudden Team Bike Exchange, not all of a sudden, but they've been sharing with Team Arkea Samsic for quite some time. Equally so, this has been great tactics, I think, by Mads Pedersen. Has he got the capability to close this gap, though, and take a stage win? 2 minutes and 1. It is coming down, Robbie. We use the minute rule, don't we, occasionally? But I'm looking at the terrain, and I'm believing in this breakaway moment by moment.
Yeah, I'm starting to believe more and more in it too, because there are only 3 riders at the front of the peloton doing the chasing, and as you said, the tactical genius of Mads Pedersen and Trek Segafredo. Well, it's only genius if it works out and you win the stage, because at the moment, the way it's starting to swing is that they won't be sprinting for the stage win. I mean, they have to come up later on, make a huge effort. I've just been looking through their team list of who might be the ones to come up and do it, because we've already seen Kenny Elizondo and Juanpe Lopez doing a heap of work, Antonio Tiberi as well. He'll still be there, and I think well capable of doing a little bit more. Got Alex Kirsch as well, Dario Cataldo, Julien Bernard. Mads Pedersen might as well throw everybody at it, because he doesn't have a lead-out team. There are no fast men there to help him in the actual sprint, and I think if they don't go up and help now, it'll be a case of them cutting off their own nose to spite their face in a way. That said, oh, we've done the bit on the climb. Well, they were just putting everybody in trouble. Yes, it was bringing back the break, but it's just putting everyone in trouble. You might as well go on with it. Race for the win.
We're hearing that Rojas has just abandoned. Remy Rojas, he was one of those that took a crash yesterday. He was hobbling around, looked really in a nasty way, and clearly he's succumbed to his injuries from then. That's a real shame, because Remy Rojas a bit of an engine more than that for Cofidis, and I was convinced he was actually going to be very much towards the fore for a chance at victory yesterday. Didn't happen. 2 minutes and 6 is the gap. It's kind of holding station, and with 26.9 kilometers to go, we're just over some lumpy stuff. You can see some riders out of the saddle here. That's not just to get back on it in to the pace here. That's about the terrain as well, and this camera shot gives you a perfect view of it. We are gently ebbing upwards and down. We're just coming to another step, if you will, and all this terrain and the way it's twisting and turning and rising and falling even now, and it has been for the last, what, 10, 12 kilometers or so, it will unwind this up and down and almost become pan flat, albeit gently descending, but without this rise and fall in about the next 5 or 6 kilometers. So the chance of making the catch, I don't know. I think they possibly could still do it, our chase here, but they're going to have to put an awful lot more power into it. Because as Dan Lloyd was saying, they keep maintaining a heck of a pace here. Average 40 kilometers per hour for the day, and that's with a climb that really extended to, what, well over 50 kilometers, Sean. It's nuts.
Yes, well, I don't know, can we call it 50 kilometres, Carlton, because
yes.
You know, the earlier part, the first 25 kilometres.
Oscar Freire agreed with me.
I know it was going up a little bit, but you know,
Oscar said so.
Well, Oscar wasn't a climber, so he was. But yeah, they were going at, you know, a steadier pace, and was when we got onto the climb, that was where Trek Segafredo really started to, you know, push on and try and put the pressure on the other sprinters. So you know, it's really we can't call it 50, but 22 kilometres is still a long one, and the way they were riding their Trek, they really started to push on, and you know, they had 2 real climbers, and you talked about that, or I think Dan talked about it. You know, the lightweight riders on the front, but they can put you under pressure as a sprinter, because you know, they just dance up those climbs at 55 kg against the men who are maybe, some of them 77 or maybe 80 kg, the big guys. So yeah, you're going to suffer trying to follow them, and yeah, it's been a difficult climb. And the big thing is, I think, the long way to the finish as well, 60 kilometers. You know, the sprinters, they will recover pretty quickly. I know Bennett had to make an effort to get back in there, but again, you know, those guys, the fitness level, they will be pretty much recovered. And now it's a question, who is going to, you know, add to the chase here in the peloton? That is going to be the outcome if the break will stay away.
Pico Hilbo Baggins, I imagine. 24.4 kilometres from home. We do have an intermediate sprint coming up in about 2 kilometres time. But that gap, 2 minutes, there's virtually been no change, Robbie. Just a handful of seconds over, what, the last 10K?
Yeah, 10, 12 seconds. I think in the last 6 kilometres.
Jumped.
10, 12, 15 seconds now. So Bora Hansgrohe now making an appearance at the front. So this is what was needed in the chase. There's an extra man come up to help, but we are missing that one man from Arkea Samsic who was riding on the front. So it's still just 3 riders forming the chase behind the 5 who have been out there Okay, all day in fairness, but it's still 5 against 3. You're going to need more riders come to the front of the peloton. So Bora now making an appearance. Trek Segafredo, it seems like they've run out of riders capable because they've got a number of riders down in the back of the peloton now. I spotted Elisonda, Tiberi down the back here, Julien Bernard. You're going to need more of a contribution from more teams. They're going to have to start throwing everything at it. 150 with 23 kilometres to go. The break at the moment still has the upper hand.
Oh, it's still in the balance though, isn't it? This is remarkable. Minute 50, we're nudging around that margin. It suddenly vaulted. 10 seconds came from absolutely nowhere. And I'm just wondering if this accord is going to start to fracture. Who's the main threat within this group then, Sean, to the likes of Fred Wright? I think of all neutrals, surely you want Fred Wright to finally come through and get himself a stage victory after being so close, not only in this race, but in the Tour de France as well, Sean.
Yes, well, you know, this is going to be a tight one. We can see, you know, coming down to the 150 with still 22 plus kilometres to go. When you get into the final, and if they do get into the final kilometres, we can see another rider there, Rochas, another one to abandon. He had that crash yesterday, of course. He took a real heavy fall. But when you get into the final and you have a slim advantage, you know, then you have to keep on riding and everybody has to try and contribute. Where if you had a number of minutes going into the final 5K, then it gets tactics. The tactics are played and riders want to attack because they know if they go to the finish with that guy, he is faster. And Fred Wright, of course, you know, he has quite a good turn of speed on him in the end. But I'm not too sure on the other riders. You know, they will know each other very well. But the problem is here, they're going to have to ride all the way to the finish if they get that far. That we will see now in the next 10 kilometres what the position will be with the advantage. Just coming down slowly, and will there be more riders from the team of Bora come to the front? Trek, I think they've decided, well, we tried, we did our job, we tried our best. We're not going to start riding. But as they get close to the finish, I'd not be surprised if you see some of the Trek Segafredo riders in the final 10 kilometres giving a handout.
They've got to keep together as a cohesive unit, Robbie. They can't start cat and mousing at any point, really, our breakaway here. Minute 46, it's working against them at the moment. Over the last 10 minutes, they've had a much quicker pace, it seems, than the chase. But that's changing as we speak. Fifth place is better than no place at all, but it's getting a bit cagey between them, I think.
It is starting to, and that's always the problem in a break like this, when the gap is fairly slender still to the chasing peloton. You're coming towards the finish. Of course they all want to stay away, but the problem is they all want to win and only one can. They need to ride like a team. As you said, they need to remain cohesive all the way in to guarantee that at least one of them will win. But there's the sticking point. All the riders in this group, they will have identified and they'll know, well, so-and-so, he's probably the quickest of us. I'm not going to beat him in a sprint. So if we're just cohesive and ride all the way to the line, well, I've basically just worked for him like a domestique, and he's going to wrap it up, and I'm going to be left empty-handed. And that's why guys start getting cagey, trying to save their legs, pick a point to attack. And that's where the breakaway starts to fall apart and give away just time, hand over fist, back to the peloton. And people will often say, watching at home, but why don't they just stick together and ride and make sure one of them wins? It's not as simple as that, because you just don't want to serve it on a platter to someone. You've got to, at a point, if you're not the fastest, you either need to ride away or gamble and let the others do the work, save your legs, and see if you can spring a miracle.
God, it's coming back, you know. A minute and 37 now. Sami Balistella of Astana, Kazakhstan is in the break. World champion at under 23 level in Harrogate in appalling conditions. So he probably sustained the rain yesterday very well indeed. Great all-rounder. He's got a bit of everything, including time trialling. He's got a bit of a kick on him as well. And who knows? Quite often you never live up to the billing out of some of the juniors, or indeed the under 23 level, but he's been in support of others. Still only 23. He was 19 by the way when at those world champs. Actually might have been 20, but anyway, as a youngster, certainly one to watch. And today the magnifying glass back at his own team base will be very much upon him. He's in the paler jersey here of Astana, Kazakhstan. They've kind of just one off the front, just rolling through right now. We also have Jimmy Jansen's terrific sprinter in his own right. He's the one I believe that they fear. However, you just never know. He's third in a 12 Bessèges. He's had a few other great results. He's gone kind of ebbed and flowed this year. Well, today he would want to be very much at the front. Goldstein out of the breakaway, unfortunately, was part of it earlier on. Very much a time trial focused rider, and the climb didn't suit him. So he would have been good as part of the engine room, but well, would he have dialed it back in by about now? We know Fred Wright's a climber, hasn't really shown his sprinting credentials, but he can time trial. So it could be that if he wants to get rid of Jensen's, he'll push on. But at the moment, doing the pushing is the peloton. And quite frankly, right now, Caden Groves must be thinking, good on you, fellas. They're doing a fantastic job for Bike Exchange at the front, and not afraid to do any work either. Arkea Samsic. And guess what? Trek have finally said, all right, we punish you on the climbs. You've done your bit. All's fair and square. Let's have a big old punch up at the line. And they're joining the fun as well. And Sean, this looks like it's coming back the way of the peloton and the sprinters.
Yes, it is, you know, coming down slowly, but you know, we're getting closer to the finish. 18 kilometres. It depends now how good the five are up front. If they're still very strong and they have, you know, pretty equal, if they all continue to ride and they all commit, you know, to the very end of the stage, they could continue for quite a long time. But we can see, you know, the freshmen appearing on the front of the peloton. That's always a problem, and you know, that's where it's going to be a real difficult one. But yeah, what a change, because when we got onto the big climb of the day, we were thinking that, you know, would they be closed down before they get to the top of the climb, the breakaway, would they be swallowed up? And here they are inside the final 20 kilometres and still out there. And we can see now the motorbikes being pushed on. We've heard about that, you know, a number of times already in this Vuelta, where, you know, the motorbike sits in the front. And of course, yeah, the teams that have men up there, they don't want the motorbike sitting on the front of the chase men in the front of peloton.
Robbie, you chose Thomas again, but his teammate Harry Sweeney, the Warwick Whirlwinds from down under, he can do a job as well when he needs to get quick. He's done it before.
Yeah, an incredibly strong rider. His best result, I would say, in his career so far, third on a Tour de France stage in a break much like this one, although they got a much more leeway from the peloton. But the man they call Sween Dog, he doesn't pack a sprint, so he'd have to get away from the rest. And to be honest, the man that I would fear the most in that group, if I was the others, is Fred Wright. He's incredibly strong, but also showed a good turn of speed a few days ago when they were, well, sprinting for second place behind the winner, Marc Soler. It was only Daryl Impey that got over the top of Fred Wright, and he led out and did most of the work on the way into town. So he's, after a day like this, is really quite quick. But a minute 24, 16 and a half, peloton bearing down on them.
Well, the only man we didn't mention from the break, Jesus Harada, runner-up in the National Championships road race. He takes terrain. He probably knows, or is it at least getting details about today. I'm certainly possibly aware of the roads and how to play. He's nearest the camera right now. It's a quality group. Take nothing away from any of them. They could deliver. Any one of them. But
sorry, Carlton,
yep.
Harad, past winner 2019. You remember that stage when he was with Dylan Towns in the end, and he sat on Dylan Towns on the uphill finish because he was riding. Towns was riding to take the race leadership, and he won the stage. And you know, he has the experience. He's also been national champion a number of times. I think 2013 and maybe 2016 or 17, something around that. So he has, you know, the experience of winning at the end of a day. You know, and when you have won those before, you're a little bit maybe calmer, and it's going to be a question now, will they have enough of an advantage to go all the way to the finish?
Yeah, it was a hard man's day a few years ago as well on the Tour de France, 2 years ago in fact, up to Mont Aigual. You may well remember the day Lutsenko won. Actually, he was one of the pre-day favourites today. Harada holding off Greg Van Avermaet, Nelson Powers, Julian Alaphilippe. So you get the idea. That was an uphill finish. This is not. It's very much going to be a quick day, but you don't know how they've ridden it. Well, we do know how they've ridden it. Extraordinarily full of fortitude, I think it's fair to say. They've been battling They've got a huge fight on their hands, however. Minute and 21. I think there's too much firepower behind them, Robbie.
There is a lot of firepower, and that firepower is increasing behind, as we've seen Bora Hansgrohe join the chase with Jonas Koch. Also, Trek Segafredo have been sending men up, so there's more and more. There's an extra man up there from Bike Exchange Jayco as well. Plenty. Look at that, 4 riders in the bright yellow from Arkea Samsic, so there's no shortage of chasers. But the time isn't tumbling all that quickly. Still a minute 18. Now less than 50k to go, and look at that, the last hour. Okay, it includes the big long downhill, but 51 kilometres an hour average over the last hour on this 190 kilometre stage. I'm still backing the peloton to catch the break, but they will not be able to let up for one single moment, or they'll just watch it slip away. Hesitation is death.
It is. We talk about cat and mouse. Well, you'd rather be the cat, I think, on a day like this. But the mice up front, maybe they're going to have that party. I do not know. This is the Peñas Pintas. 1,985 meters above sea level. They've climbed whatever, 3,300 meters today. That is a hell of an altitude gain. The terrain that we're dealing with is absolutely beautiful, if almost otherworldly. And so would the performance be of the break if it does make it home, but it's trimmed down to a minute and 17 now. And I think they lost a little bit of cohesion. There was just a suggestion that there may well be a few passengers within this group. And as Robbie was saying, that is just going to kill you off, I'm afraid. They need to work as a time trialing unit right now. And I just don't know whether they've got the legs or even the design, Sean, to bring this off. We'll find out in 13 kilometres time or so.
Yes, well, I think, you know, they all want to continue on here, but it comes to a point where, you know, you want to spare a little bit of energy for the final. But you know that is going to be a very tight one. You're getting information that, you know, the peloton is pushing along and that closing down on you. But yeah, you do not want to panic either, because if you start riding much more than the other ones and then you get to the finish, well, then they're going to take in the sprint anyway, unless, you know, you're feeling really good. And sometimes you get riders that are exceptionally strong in the final, you know, 15, 20 kilometres when the pressure is on. So, you know, you just never know what a rider is exactly doing here, but it looks like that they're all working quite well here. But we can see in the front of the peloton again, you know, we see Bike Exchange, Arkea Samsic, but Bora, you know, just putting one man in, and, you know, that is going to be the, you know, on the riders' minds that are riding here. Where are the guys from Bora? Because Bennett, he has the fastest sprint here. Trek Segafredo, we know. Pedersen, he's really fast as well. He's been, you know, second a number of times. They're going to be thinking that, why are we riding and they not riding? And, you know, that takes a little bit as well, but still it's all the time coming down. But we're also getting closer to the finish, and these guys are going to start getting tired here. And I think if we see, you know, fresh legs coming to the front here, that's where it will be the killer for the breakaway.
Yeah, that's exactly what they need, those fresh legs, Sean. And when we talk about Bora Hansgrohe, we've got Jonas Koch up there riding hard, but they're trying to save the likes of Ryan Mullen and Danny van Poppel to do the lead out when it comes down to a bunch sprint. It's looking more likely it's going to be that, but still well hanging in the balance. But the rest of the team, you've got the climbers, Igita, Jai Hindley, Wilco Kelderman. They're not going to do the chasing today. They've gone all out yesterday in the mountains. They're saving them their legs for tomorrow as well. So it's a real split team. So Sam Bennett can't rely on the entire force of Bora Hansgrohe, and he's trying to keep a couple of guys in reserve for when it does come back together. He's got the best sprint train, which you would think would almost guarantee him a third sprint victory in this Vuelta, the way Danny van Poppel and Ryan Mullen have been leading him out this first week.
I think almost a gift, really, to the likes of Dan McClay is that he was formerly a lead-out man himself. He's, of course, since Bouhanni got injured, he's now taken on the role of sprinting. But he's kind of used to not relying on anybody else. As a lead-out man, that's his sense. And he's been busy burning his team at the front without a care, really, because I think he's going to try and latch on to other wheels. We've seen him sharing shoulders with Tim Malia earlier in this race. He's not afraid to stake out his territory, if you will. But he's a great fighter, Dan McClay, and that's what you get in the best lead-out man. And he could turn that into something a bit special, but he's burnt his team on the front. Okay, Samsic, they see him every time. I don't know whether it's just luck or fortune that each time we go back, we see the boys in the bright yellow. But if he's got a chance today, Dan McClay could well be a very, very good bet. But they've got to catch these guys first. 10.4 kilometres from home, minute and 3. Gosh, it could go any way. Oh.
Yeah, well, it could. They're burning through riders on the front of that peloton.
Yeah.
As you just mentioned, Arkea Samsic, we've seen them one after the other do a really big turn, buckle themselves, pull off to the right, and then just blow back along the side of the peloton. And that is their work done. So we're starting to run low on numbers at the front of that peloton. And only one Bora Hansgrohe, only one from Trek Segafredo. You got 3 from Bike Exchange Jayco. You're going to need fresh horses to come to the front if you're going to bring these guys undone, because they're now 1 minute in front with 10k to go.
Ah, the Stallions are at it, Sean.
Yes, I think Arkea Samsic are also thinking, you know, if we get this back and come down to a sprint, Dan McClay has a possibility of getting up there on the sprint, maybe hopefully winning it. But the points, we know, Arkea Samsic, there you're concerned about the points for the team's rankings at the end of the season. So that's probably also on their mind. If it comes back together, you know, they know that Dan McClay should be able to get into the top 3 at least. Where if you do not catch the breakaway, well, then you're sprinting for 6th place, so the points go down rapidly.
Yeah, good point, Sean. As you can see, they've done a fantastic job here. 57 seconds. It doesn't seem that long before we went through this gate, but that's still a lot of ground where it's slowly but surely being closed down. It may well be they'll have some wriggle room towards the end, and we might see that we get a knocking back of the pace by our breakaway. If they hold a margin of even 30 seconds, they'll start charlieing around, I'm certain of it, within the last K.
Good news for the sprinters. So the riders from Arkea, they go off, they drift back, but they've fought their way back to the front. A little bit of recovery in the wheels, just surf their way back to the front and just pull out another big turn, trying to get Dan McClay in a position to try and win a stage of this Welter. That's good news for the sprinters, but you see it, one turn, they drift away, they miss half a dozen turns, and the peloton over that 10k, they need to take an average of 6 seconds per kilometre. They've taken 4 seconds in the last kilometre and a half. The break is looking better and better.
That clicking in here is the abacus brain of Robbie McEwen. 8.2 kilometres from home, 53 seconds is the gap. Let's see if they do start messing around, Sean, it'll kill them off.
Well, they can't do that. You know, everybody has to continue on riding, and if you're not, you know, doing as much as the other riders, you still ride through and go to the front, and maybe not as long on the front as some of the other riders. But if you start doing that, well, then you know the other riders are going to start looking around.
Well, everyone that comes to the front here does their turn. You heard a little bit of freewheeling a few moments ago, but that's just the gift of being allowed to sit out of the wind. 7.6 kilometres to go, 53 seconds. I think it's going to be extremely close. There's going to be a natural pickup in the pace as we come down to Riverside. We're nearly there, by the way. We'll be reaching the side of the river, which, as you know, they're not fast flowing in these parts. But it's going to be very, very flat, and it's pretty straightforward, the run in as well. A couple of roundabouts to deal with that'll upset a few, and that maybe the main important one is at 2.2 kilometres from home. I'll be there in 5, so we'll be there before you know it. There's a kink in the road as well at about 550 metres. It's a right-hander, and then you get a view of the line. It could be a real dash for the cash, and indeed the points, as Sean was pointing out, so crucial to some of those teams in the new UCI system that we have. More on that later, but 51 seconds now. It's still touch and go, but it's starting to swing back favour-wise, I think, to the break. But the Caden Groves Bike Exchange boys, they want a piece of the day.
They do. I mean, they've been working really hard all day long. They've done a lot of the chasing. They've looked after Groves really well. But look at that, with 6.5 kilometres to go, 51 seconds. They've only taken 9 seconds in 3.5 kilometres. So they are resisting really well this break. And that million-dollar question is, can they stay cohesive long enough to make sure one of them is going to win the day? Who's going to be the first one to go, I'm going to start saving the legs, or just try and put myself in a position to attack? Because not all of them pack enough of a sprint to realistically win the stage. Something's going to come undone soon.
Well, I don't know whether
can't.
is it going to be those behind or those up front, Sean?
Well, I think the DS is going to, you know, be relaying information to the riders here, and I think you have to, you know, tell a rider, and I think Robbie would be in the same frame of mind. Yeah, you tell your rider, just keep on riding, try and spare a bit of energy, as they say, you know, just go to the front, but don't push as much, and get ever so close to the finish. And then when you get into that final 2 kilometers, if you have that, you know, 30 seconds, 35 seconds, then try something. But if you try it here, you know, you're going to throw away the chances for yourself. I don't think it would be the tactic, but we've seen in the past, you know, breaks like that, and a guy attacks 4 kilometers out and he just really kills it off and messes up the breakaway, looking like they had, you know, a small chance of holding on.
Harry Sweeney, look at him, he's blowing like Louis Armstrong at the moment, but that's a good thing. He's actually just computing when he's going to go. He can TT a bit, he's got a bit of a kick on him as well. Dare he shred himself and maybe hit glory? We'll wait and see. 49 seconds only, 4.9 kilometres. There's a sense of balance and serendipity about that. You're going to shred all of that. Look at the peloton at the moment. They've picked up the pace. They're coming in like a steam train, but is it all too late? Is it going to come off the rails for the chase?
It's looking like it's going to be too late for the peloton, but it all rests in the hands of the men in the breakaway, and they're starting to do their calculations. How much longer do I need to keep doing these big turns on the front and cooperating smoothly with the guys I've been away with all day long? When can I go on the attack? How far out do I think I can hold on for? As one more of the Bike Exchange Jayco riders swung away from the front, job done, he can no more, and they are not getting any closer. In fact, they've lost another second to the break. I think the ideal time and the ideal moment to go is when you're getting really close to the finish and others start to think about the sprint. That moment they go to ease, the moment of hesitation, if you can nail that millisecond to go and catch them, they'll all look at each other and one will be gone.
Sean, it's difficult to know who's got anything left after a day that's been ridden as hard as it has by these guys. They spent a long time up the road. They've worked very well together. They're going to have to start assaulting each other, though, late on. 3.7 kilometres from home. I think they're going to make it. There's that roundabout with 2. Who's your pick, Sean?
Well, they have to make it now, and as we get to the 3 kilometres mark, it goes downhill a bit until about, you know, 1.5 to go. So we can see there where the break was. It's just a little bit of an incline with this 45 seconds. They have to make it if they keep on working as they have been. And the question is, who is going to have, you know, that bit more left here? You talk about a sprint, who've got the better sprint on them, but yeah, it's at the end of the day, this breakaway, it's just that bit of energy that can be the winning of the stage if you've got that bit more than the others.
45 seconds. I've seen gaps like that snuffed out, but not on flat land like this, and not with this kind of quality up front. We are at 3.1 kilometres from home. 2.2 out. We've got that roundabout. I'm not sure whether they're going to be guided round one side of it. It's suggestive that they will. It's cordoned on one side. Going to be on the right-hand side. They go round, I think.
Yeah, it does look like it's on the right-hand side, and 43 seconds. You'd have to say they've got it unless they choose themselves to throw it all away and start cat and mousing just way too much.
Who's got anything left out of this group? Well, we've passed the 3 kilometres to go marker, but look, Jumbo-Visma are up front. I think they're done for. I can't see any sprinters teams up here anymore. Last little card being played here by Bora Hansgrohe, but it's to nothing. 2.5 kilometres from home, so it's going to be these guys. You've seen the balance of the speed between the peloton and the chase, that is, and these guys. This is your break, and looking at it now, it is done for, Sean. They may well sprint for some modest points, but this is going to be our breakaway with 2.2 to go. They're just hitting that roundabout, those up front.
Well, it has to be for the breakaway now. Just 42 seconds as we go to the 2 kilometres to go. We can see the front of the peloton. You know, there's not that super fast pace. If they were really driving on with a number of teams really, you know, a super high pace, we might see him getting closer, but 43 seconds is down to them breakaway for the stage now, and it's going to be a little bit starting now. You know, when we get into the final 2 kilometres here, they're going to start looking around each other, and yeah, it's the time when, you know, the adrenaline start to flow, the nerves start to build a bit. This is my opportunity. What do I do here? We can see Fred Wright there on the front, giving the elbow to get the other riders to come through.
Fantastic. Ballestella comes through right now, starts to pace them just a little bit. Fred Wright doesn't want to be anyone's fool, neither does anyone else here. Harada's playing the clever old fox here, comes to the fore. It won't be a long turn at all by him. Forces Jimmy Jansen to the front right now. Jansen's is on there. Here comes through Harry Sweeney, looking cool, calm and collected. Ronnie McEwen's doing the calm down sign for everybody. That's precisely what they're doing at the moment, Robbie.
I'm doing this, slowing down, they're slowing